Hey, y'all. Welcome to Shade in the City. As promised, I'm here to spin the block and get into episode 137 of Beyond the Gates. This would have been Thursday's episode. So we do know that Doug has went up yonder to meet his maker, okay? So rest in peace, Doug McBride. But yeah, y'all. Um, I know sometimes y'all wonder, like, why do you still come back and give us recaps if you do a whole live? Well, most of the time it's only for members only. But second of all, is because there's certain things that sometimes I feel like I miss. Just because we're all sharing thoughts and whatever and going through the chat and the comments. But I felt like I didn't get into Nicole's behind the way that I really should have. And so going back to go through it again, I have some select words that I'm pretty sure um, some people, aka my head Ursher, might not like. Okay. But I thank y'all so much for being here with me. If you haven't already, please do me a big favor. Go ahead, hit that like button, Shade Squad. And if you are a new viewer and you're liking the vibe, please go ahead and subscribe and help us continue to grow and glow. But all right, y'all, I ain't gonna waste too much time. Let's go ahead and get into this episode and let's get shady. Okay, so we start off this episode. We see Vernon come into the room. He's trying to have a conversation with Anita and asking her if she's seen the news about them trying to determine who should play her in the Articulates biopic. And so Anita is obviously really not listening. She's off in a daze. And so he was like, they want Haley Bailey, however you say it, to play her. And so Anita, again, is not interested in what he's saying. And so he was like, well, what's wrong with you? So Anita said, look, I've been over spreadsheets 50 times and I'm trying to figure out how to make someone pay for hurting one of our daughters. And I said, okay, not spreadsheets, Anita. So that's when Nicole storms in snitching, straight up snitching. At first, Anita's worried and she's like, oh, well, did Ted do something else? And so Nicole says, no, it's not Ted. And she said, that's not who I'm worried about. And so Anita said, well, what has Danny gone and done? Because it got to be her, right? And so Anita's pressing Nicole, well, you going to tell us what? And so Nicole says, look, words can't do it justice, right? So she shows them the photo of Danny and Andre that the impersonator had posted from the wedding chapel. And so Anita takes a look at the phone and Nicole tells her, that someone from the hospital had texted it to her because the officiant, Anita impersonator, had posted it. And so she was like, I just didn't want y'all to be blindsided. And so Vernon said, is this like one of them deep fake situations? And I was laughing to myself because I said, that's so funny because they're so much older. And it's like I ain't even gonna hold you. It just tickled me because that's how I feel about some things now. Nicole said, nah, that's not what it is. And said, because I recognize the outfit that Danny's in. So Anita is not impressed by this impersonator and says, this looks nothing like me. So they question, what could Danny possibly be thinking? And Nicole goes on about thinking before you act has never really been Danny's strong suit. And I was like, it's giving bitter. Like, I don't know. I just felt like it was crazy for her to go up there and then snitch on her sister and then talk about oh how unstable she is. Like I'm gonna save it because this is not the only scene, but I didn't like it. Anita is cursing the day that Danny ever met Bill, and Vernon's confused on how Bill get in it. And so Anita said, because every time Bill hurt her, Danny goes on this path of self-destruction. You're headed for self-destruction. What? And so, and then we left to clean up the mess. So Nicole wants Danny to stop giving Bill and Haley so much mental real estate and fears that if it doesn't stop, it'll only lead to her finding other ways to numb her pain. Now that I'll give her, but even and still, I just think that it's giving you mad at the world And so everybody, and because Danny don't treat you like that. And I think that's what bothers me the most about it is Danny never treats Nicole like that. She don't ever talk about her like that. And I don't know. I just didn't like it. I'm gonna be honest. I didn't like that. Andre and Danny returned back home, hungover and married. Okay. Okay. So Danny is asking Andre, like, do you think I need AA? And because who goes out and gets blackout drunk and then goes and gets married? And Andre was like, clearly we do. So he's like, look, well, you know what? I really just feel like I should be able to crash here. But then he said, no, 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 no. We need to figure out what we're gonna do about this marriage situation. So she said, you know what? I'm gonna call my lawyer and try to get this annulled before any of the press or my family find out about this. Okay. So Andre doesn't like the way that Danny just, threw an annulment out there. Like, oh, damn, that's how you feel. So Andre is like, so you really don't want to be married like in real life? So Danny says, no, that's what you go to Vegas for. You let your freak flag fly and you never have to worry about the consequences. Danny tells him that the last thing her family needs is another scandal. And so she reminds him of, plus we was real good where we was at, friends with benefits. And, we know that that's all that's ever going to be. It's like persistent that my family can't know that we got married, right? So Jacob is trying to get in touch with Vanessa and, leaving her voicemails. But he hasn't been able to get in touch with her. And so he asked her, well, please call me back as soon as possible. Malone is like, oh, so you still having trouble getting in touch with Vanessa? And so of course Jacob gets a little defensive and is like, oh, so you thought you can got in touch with her faster? And Malone's like, oh, okay. We in our feelings. So finally, Vanessa is in between the sheets with Joey, okay? Ooh, baby, baby. I feel your love surrounding me. So finally, Vanessa goes to check her phone, and in between sessions, she realizes, oh, damn, I got some missed calls from Jacob. Something must be wrong. So she calls Jacob back, and she's like, is something wrong with the twins? Everything good? And so he said, look, I came by your house looking for you. Okay. And he said, but, and so Vanessa lets him know, well, I'm out of town on business. And so Jacob breaks the news to her that, look, Doug was in a car accident this morning, and unfortunately, he has passed away. So Vanessa asks Jacob for more details on what happened, of course. And so he lets her know Doug lost control of the car, went off the highway into a ravine, and the car caught on fire. I said, so he lets her know that, they found a flask on the scene and it reportedly smelled of alcohol. So they do believe that he was under the influence, but they won't know more until they run tests. So Vanessa asked if he suffered, and Jacob said, well, right now we're just still waiting on a coroner's report, but I do believe that, he was unalived on impact. So Vanessa says, well, I'm just happy to know that that was the case because Doug always hated pain. And so Jacob tells her, well, this is going to be a rough time for you. So I think that you should relax, make sure you take care of yourself. And he said, but when you get a chance, I know it's rough, but I need you to come down to the station and review some items that they recovered at the scene. And so Vanessa said, no, of course, I'm coming right away. And then, of course, she gets off the phone and Joey is asking her what happened. And then that's when Vanessa tells her about Doug's accident and tells him that her husband is dead. Oh. And then can I just say Lauren gave an amazing, amazing, amazing performance this episode. Hands down. Like I said, I didn't even really care for Doug like that, but I felt it. It pulled on my heartstrings. So kudos to her. So then we see Haley, she on the phone popping her gums with Caroline or whatever. About Vanessa and Joey when Bill enters the room and he's like overhearing a conversation. So Bill reminds her, think back to when you were the topic of conversation and everybody was speculating that we had something going on. And so Haley said, and it was true. Yeah. So Bill said, okay, but that's not the case with Vanessa and Joey, as far as I know. And he said, in my eyes, Vanessa and Doug are solid. Okay, so back over at the police station, Jacob is telling Marcel, how difficult it was to break the news to Vanessa. And Jacob says, I couldn't have imagined what Vanessa's going through. And I would have hate to, think if that was Naomi. And Marcel said, yeah, I wouldn't be comparing marriages, especially not with Doug and Vanessa's. So Jacob said, well, I heard the cheating rumors too, but I heard Vanessa's voice on the other end of that phone, and she sounded devastated. And Marcel tells him karma's a bitch, okay? And her husband chose to get behind the wheel after drinking, and he brought it on himself. And so for me, if I was Jacob, Mr. Dogood, that would have for me been the signal, or it would have made the alarm bells go off. That why does this man, why is he just so unsympathetic to this man's passing? I mean, it could be because he feels like, oh, you were a drunk driver and it is what it is. But so Jacob is talking to Marcel about, Doug's accident and questions. Well, why would he be speeding down the highway in the early hours of the morning? And why wouldn't he call a ride share? So Marcel responds, because drunk makes you stupid. Back at Haley and Bill, she's mentioning how, Danny has been real quiet lately. And my notes say, again, Haley, she's living in your head rent free. So Bill said, oh, so you complaining? And Haley claims, no, I'm always on guard, but I feel like Danny might be faking us out. And so Bill suggests that, look, maybe Danny really got it this time when I told her that, look, this is where things stand between us. We're just co-parents. So Haley's like, well, I just hope she stays in her lane for our sake. She's hoping that Danny's going to finally grasp that there is no chance of her and Bill getting back together and she'll just move on. And Bill was like, yeah, that's not going to happen anytime soon. And so Haley was like, why? Because you're just so hard to get over? And so Bill brings up Danny's overreaction to their marriage. He says that they were over for a long time before the papers were served, but Danny just didn't want to see it. He then goes on about how she always had a deep emotional connection with him since they met. And so Haley was like, oh, so it wasn't mutual? And Bill admits that, yeah, I loved her at one point. And he breaks it down for Haley how it's just easier for men to move on from failed relationships. So he said, I do expect Danny to indulge in, an occasional fling or something like that, but she's nowhere ready for what we had. And so Haley's like, yeah, you know what, you're right. And so as he gets ready to run out to the office, that's when Haley gets the text from Caroline with the photo of Danny and Andre, obviously, at the altar. Haley is acting as if she's happy for Danny. Bill doesn't share those same sentiments, and he is not amused at all. Haley was like, why are you so mad about your former family when you have a new one? And I said, okay, that bothered me. Because regardless, they still spent 30 plus, I'm sure, years together. So yeah, no, he should still care about her. Now, maybe not who she's screwing. And I can understand you being upset about that. But this, oh, you have a new family. Like I didn't like that comment. And maybe that's not how she meant it, but I didn't like that comment. Then Bill reminds her, but we got kids. Okay. And Haley reminds him, but your kids are grown as hell. So Bill tries to use Chelsea being traumatized as his reasoning, but Haley lets him know that shouldn't affect her recovery. So now you just make it up and thinking I'm gonna believe it because I'm, kind of low key, not that bright. You know what I'm saying? Bill doesn't agree with her and he accuses Danny of being selfish. And so Haley was like, all right, is it really Chelsea you worried about? Bill gets upset and he said, look, I can't keep replaying this every time Danny acts up. He said, I ain't got time to keep reassuring your insecure ass, I'm adding that on, of my devotion to you and only you. And Bill gets up and leaves. And so Haley is like, oh, and then she realizes he left his briefcase, but Bill gone so fast. He over here like the what's him call it? What's the little beep beep? He like the road runner. He gone. So Danny is not feeling her best, but she's more focused on trying to resolve the mess of this marriage before her parents find out. So Andre promises, look, I'm gonna keep my mouth shut. Andre's like, yeah, I love your parents as well. And I ain't trying to be the cause of nobody's disappointment. Especially after what my Uncle Ted did to Aunt Nicole. And I love when Danny looked at him and said, can you please not refer to her as Aunt Nicole while we're still married? And I said, thank you. So Andre is like, oh, it's not like we blood relatives. And Danny said, okay, but the entertainment reporters and social media ain't gonna give a damn about that. And I said, I'm glad that you said it. Because you know how we was all thinking when this first started going down. I'm just saying. She starts thinking about, well, what Naomi and Chelsea possibly will have to say about it. And I love when Andre clocks her. He said, are you really worried about what they have to say about it? Or are you worried about what Bill has to say? And I said, ooh. And he was like, is that why you being so secretive? And so he accuses her, what it is you don't want your first husband to know about your second. I said, And so Danny said, I don't care if Bill find out about our temporary marital status. So Andre don't believe her. And Danny said, well, look, I do care. Okay, I do. I admit it. And so she's like, well, how do you think Ashley would feel if she found out? Andre said, I mean, it could be worse things that could happen. I mean, really. It's Ashley. Okay. They get into this conversation about how they appreciate being able to keep it real with one another. And Danny even hints that, oh, okay, well, maybe this marriage isn't so bad for us after all, right? So that's when they get interrupted by Andre's phone because he gets a phone call from Nicole asking him to come over to her parents' house. She doesn't really reveal what it is. And so Danny was like, oh, what was it about? And of course, Danny got the scared look on her face. And Andre said, oh, it must be something dealing with Ted. He's like, they can't know about the wedding. So Danny is, and of course, Danny's hopeful that nobody knows anything by the time Andre gets back to their house, that their marriage will be annulled. We see Joey, he's trying to console an inconsolable Vanessa, and she's still in disbelief that, Doug is gone. So she's beating herself up, thinking back to that last conversation and how she spoke to him. And I said, that's what did it. That's what did it. I ain't even gonna hold you. So Joey assures her that, look, Doug knew how you felt about him. So Vanessa lashes out and, Doug got drunk and got behind the wheel. And she questions, why wasn't he thinking about me or our kids? So she tells him, Jacob found the flask, and Joey jumps up and said, oh, what else did Jacob tell you? So Vanessa tells him, look, I got to go back. I got to identify Doug's items, that were left at the scene. And then I got to tell my kids. So Joey is like, girl, you don't need to do right now. You don't need to do anything in this moment. She starts breaking down and Joey assures her, look, no matter what, the three of them are going to be all right. And so Vanessa tells Joey, despite what he thinks about their unconventional marriage, I really loved him. So Vanessa's like, I know everybody think I'm a terrible wife. I know I'm in a hotel room hunching you while Doug is somewhere in the ravine. I know. And so Joey said, you are not to blame for Doug running off the road. Accidents happen, okay? And so Vanessa looks at Joey and said, did you have anything to do with this? Right now, you looking real suspect, okay? And so Joey said, look, I had no respect for Doug. I admit that. But that's not a reason to want him unalive, okay? He said, I would never hurt you. And I know harming Doug would do just that. So I ask him again, look, did you have anything to do with this? Joey tells her adamantly and unequivocally, no, okay? So he's still swearing like, look, I ain't do nothing to Doug. And he tells Vanessa, I need you to stop playing this what if game because it's only going to make things worse. And he said, I think you should go get in a hot shower, relax, because you about to go through it the next few days. And so Vanessa, looks at Joey and just, thank you so much for taking care of me. And I said, girl, if you only knew. So we see Vernon, who happened to be on the phone with, I guess, the family publicist, Ned. He's attempting to keep Danny and Andre's marriage out of the press. That's when Nicole says, well, I think it's a little too late for that. So Vernon says, well, Ned is, doing what he can to get them, at least the impersonator's post taken down. So that's when Andre shows up at the Dupree's and they ask him to explain the photo. And they said, look, we tried to get in touch with Danny, but we couldn't reach her. So Andre explains that when our phones were off and, I didn't realize. And then they show him the photo. And he said, and honestly, I didn't realize that the impersonator was taking photos. Okay. So that's when Vernon gets a little fired up. And he said, you more concerned about pictures than getting drunk and running off and marrying my daughter in Vegas. And so Anita tells Andre, look, we're just really disappointed. We really expected more from you. So Nicole echoes that same sentiment and says, I really thought you cared about Danny. And so Andre says, I do. And then Vernon said, well, this is one hell of a way of showing it. And if you had real feelings for Danny, you would have had integrity and class to be upfront about your plans, not drag her off to some quickie win. And I said, well, and I love when Andre looked at them and said, respectfully, me nor Danny owe y'all any explanation or need your permission. And I said that part, okay, I don't believe in disrespecting my elders, but you got the wrong one because that Andre is nobody's child in that room, but Danny is, okay? You better get out of my face. Nicole is like, oh, so y'all planned it, and Andre denies that, but of course she's like, I know how my sister rolled. So Andre tries to take the fall for Danny. He's like, look, I'll take accountability fine, I did it. It's my fault. My notes say Nicole is so upset with Danny, almost more than her parents. So Andre is starting to defend Danny and her actions to the family, which Nicole clocks. Nicole talks about how Danny throws her, not only her life, but everyone else's into chaos, and says if no one has noticed, she's not the only one that has had her life blown up. It says, and the rest of them would like a break from the endless drama. And I said, did you just make this about you? It wasn't about you. And is that why you're mad? Do you feel like everybody should be focused and poor Nicole when you said that, when you've been adamant about that's not what you want? I'm confusion. And that little I don't know. I just feel like Danny has never done that to you. And it's giving real bitter vibes for real. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Okay. So Andre is still apologizing, and Vernon said, well, what do you intend to do about it? So Andre lets him know that, look, we're having the marriage annulled as we speak. And so Vernon's like, good, well, at least y'all doing that. And so that means Danny's coming to her senses. And then that's when Nicole blurts out, until the next crisis. And so she's like, you know what? I'm Danny'd out for the day. And so then Nicole keeps going on and was like, and you know what really bugs me is that Andre is more loyal to Danny than Ted ever was to me. And I said, see, so it's about you. You just made this about you. So after Nicole leaves, Vernita just sits there and talk about how they hate seeing Nicole in pain. And I said, I do too, because girl, it's so misdirected. Like, and I don't know why. Danny gets on the phone with her attorney. And then she's talking about this annulment when Bill sneaks into the house and startles her. And so Bill comes in and he's trying to read Danny for filth about marrying a man half her age. And literally my notes say like he's not married to Haley. Danny was like, what you're not going to do is just roll up in here unannounced when you were the one that said that we need to stop spending so much time together. And now you at my house insulting me. And so Bill was like, I want answers about this wedding photo. And so Danny said, oh, no. That is no longer my job. And your child bride, that's for her to deal with now. Okay. So then she adds that, you know what? And you should probably go home to her because you know that Haley's waiting for somebody to slice up her bananas in the frosted flakes. And I said, what? It's time for her feeding. I told y'all. Okay. And so he says, if you're smart, you'll have this ridiculous marriage annulled before Chelsea and Naomi find out. And then he stomps off and Danny grins because she got him all wound up. And of course she won. That was her goal. That was her goal. Checkmate. Jacob is at the station still agonizing over this, the loss of Doug. And so Jacob, so Marcel is like, why are you so caught up in the DUI? And so Jacob says, my gut is just telling me that something ain't right. Marcel said, look, Doug was a lush, okay? He ended his life behind the wheel of his fancy car. And Marcel said, I'm just happy no one else was hurt. And he asked Jacob, just move on. And so we can solve some and so he tells Jacob, let's just move on so we can solve some real cases. Okay. So that's when Jacob gets a call about a smash and grab. So he heads out. And that's when Marcel calls Joey and tells him everything went off without a hitch. Okay. And so Joey's like, you covered all your tracks, you good? And Marcel says, as far as the world is concerned, Doug lost his life in a tragic accident. I said, well. So then we see Bill return home because he realized, oh, I left my briefcase. And of course, Haley's there. And she mentions how quickly he left and the fact that she couldn't catch him. And then obviously she's upset when she learns that he ran over to Danny's to go confront her. Andre returns back to Danny's house and lets her know that the family does know. And he's actually a little bit confused about how calm is about learning the news. And so she apologizes for, unfortunately him taking all of that grilling and, getting barbecued. Andre said, well, look, I explained to your parents that we're getting it annulled. And then he said, well, actually, how do you feel if we just stayed married a little while longer? And I said, here come the bulls. They done came to us with a scheme that Danny set up to come to us with the bullshit. Okay. And yeah, y'all, that was episode 137 of Beyond the Gates. So yeah, y'all, if you haven't already, please do me a favor. Go ahead and hit that like button. Make sure that you guys comment. Make sure that you subscribe and make sure you hit the notification bell. Make sure that you are following us on all the platforms. That's the TikTok, the Twitter, the Facebook, the IG, the Lemonade. All right. I love y'all, and I will catch you for 138. Have a good night.